Hi and welcome to a Roaring podcast where we interview interesting guests talking about innovation, data, product development, and tech. Stay tuned and get some new insights. My name is Pontus Holmberg and I'm your host. In today's episode of a Roaring podcast, we will meet Isabell Rósen, who is product manager at Yabie. We will talk about digital inclusion. We will talk about the cashless society and the future of payments. Stay tuned. Welcome, Isabell. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Finally back after, finally might not be the right word, but back from holiday, vacation. So full throttle. Really excited to have you on board. Thank you for joining our podcast. And for our audience, this episode will be focusing about trends and slightly future orientation around payments. So what do you do and what is Yabie?
So Yabie is a point of sale and payments company that focus on smart solutions for small to medium businesses. And at Yabie, I work as the product manager for payments. So I try to find the best payment solutions for our merchants and our product. So that's the short version.
That's a good elevator pitch, making it easy for me to understand. So as a product manager, I start off with some questions because I'm not an expert in payments. But so as a product manager, specifically within your role at Yabie, are you then working with the sort of development sort of from a product side to create those best payment solutions for your merchants?
Exactly. So my job is to understand what our merchants need in terms of payments so that they can run their business successfully. And then I translate that into a product strategy and the product features that we think can solve their problems, and evaluate if we're doing the right thing or if we need to improve something. And
so then I have another question. Is there any particular sort of customer groups at Yabie that your sort of product or service is focusing on, or is it payment in general that you support whatever company in the world, or do you have a specific sort of focus for your product?
Yes, so our customers are small business owners. Usually it's a pizzeria or a hair salon or something similar. So it's a different segment and a segment that is in need of technical solutions, but they are not necessarily technically knowledgeable themselves. And they don't have time or interest in technology. So we are here to help them and to find the right solutions for them.
Basically meaning that if I would be let's assume that I'm selling T-shirts in the streets of Kathmandu, I would then be a potential customer, to simplify it. And then I don't need to be that very tech and to understand how to implement this, because I guess that's the whole trick with your sort of system or with your product, that potentially you need a internet connection and then you're up and running because you do the magic behind the scenes with your service.
Exactly. And when it comes to POS and payments, it's quite complex.
Yeah.
And what we try to do is to make it very simple and seamless for this type of target group.
Understand. Is that also, are you then sort of focusing on a global sort of approach on your services, or do you focusing on particularly in Nordics or?
So right now we operate in Sweden and Norway.
Okay. Yep. I think that you potentially already answered the question, but this is just some thoughts or idea from me to take off the interesting discussion. So yes, payment software or solutions can be, quite complex and potentially even a nightmare to understand for small vendors or companies. I mean, it's totally fine if you are an insurance company, if you're a bank, or if you're another major company where you actually have the resources to do those kind of advanced big implementations of a payment solution. So then we were touching about the concept of sort of digital inclusion. And when I use that phrase, I think it's, at least from my point of view, it's a good example. Obviously, is when you're on an individual level, would be using my mother as an example, or my grandmother when she was alive, was born in a time era where internet obviously didn't exist, and then a lot of services was emerging from that new technology, and then suddenly you were able to do all your bank errands within a bank portal, e-bank. And that's easy for you and me because obviously, we were quite young and we can adapt to that change. But there is obviously a huge number of people that still today obviously comes a little bit behind, even if the digital banking is obviously improving themselves and make it easier, etc. But what's happening within that industry is also that they are removing the offices, the bank offices. So I'm guessing the introduction to that is basically, I'm guessing that I can see some similarities in that digital inclusion, because you have those smaller vendors might be similar to my old grandmother in that context, because it's a complicated process to get a payment solution in place. But they just want to drive their business, and they want to operate, and they want to obviously excel their businesses by providing the ability to get paid with modern payment methods. So it's not a question in it, but that's the analogy that I think it's an interesting company. Do you have any sort of comments into that sort of digital inclusion concept or?
Yes, to me, digital inclusion is to make sure that digital solutions or tech is available for everyone, and that it solves problems for people that today are manual or difficult. And when it comes to a lot of processes that exists today, especially for small businesses, it's not something that they want to do. It's something they have to do. And when it comes to point of sale and payments, there are a lot of rules they need to follow and legislation when it comes to tax reporting and things. So if they wouldn't have a digital solution to this, it would mean lots of manual work and lots of investigation on their end to understand all of this. So I think for companies like Yabie that try to solve this for this target group in a way that they understand, so that they can focus on what they are good at and what they want to focus on, I think that's key when it comes to digital inclusion, that they get a chance to do what they need to do, and we take care of the tech behind it.
The boring part. If you are selling t-shirts or if you run a pizza, I guess that compliance and the processes behind a transaction is obviously less of interest for the vendor. Yeah,
exactly.
So then a follow-up question on that is, how do you do that? How do you include them? Yes, of course you try to sell your service to them, but how do you do that more specifically?
So the point of sale and cash registers in Sweden today, there's still a lot of small businesses that use very old hardware that needs cable connections and change of batteries. And if you would see them and pay attention to some of these hardware that you might see out there, you will see that it looks like something from the 80s. Yeah. It's very old and dated and requires a lot of maintenance. So what we and Yabie do is that we have created an app that can run on an iPad. And we put all this technology that exists in this old hardware into that app. So the first thing we do is removing unnecessary and difficult hardware and put it into an app instead. And then, of course, it's the part of these users to understand how to use our point of sale. And there goes a lot of user research that we do. And we use our customers a lot to get feedback on how to improve the experience for them, so that when they use our point of sale, to them it's easy. and it's adapted to their needs. So we use a lot of design, but we also look in the market and see what type of functionalities is normal and what should we, improve. And that's basically the product itself. It's an app. And then we, of course, from a payments point of view, we have payments integrations, and we make sure that we're integrated towards the payment methods that their customers want to pay with. So here's important for us to not tell them what to pay with. We should listen to their customers. What do they want to pay with, so that our merchants don't need to miss any sales because they can't accept the payment method.
I understand. And with that said, just thinking in my head that, yes, you are a tech payment company, but listening to you, I guess that a lot of the focuses for you would be usability.
Exactly.
That's instead of focusing on the actual technology behind. That's your core. That's what you're supporting a customer with. But that comes out of the box for them, at least. But to get them on board this application that you mentioned, it needs to be user friendly, because that is actually what they are using. How the payment and the transaction works in the behind the scenes. Obviously, they don't care about that, but they need to have a smooth interaction with your system, which is then articulated through this web app. So you in my head also, it's very important with user interface, with UX, UI work into those applications, because that's potentially what a potential customer would be judging you from, not the advanced technology behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And with that said, it also sounded like today those vendors that hasn't done this transition yet, they're obviously using some old legacy systems, hardware. Is it easy for Yabie and for you when you're talking to those customers to get them to do this change? Or is it a challenge, or is it, how hard is it for you as a product manager or the sales team to actually get the attention?
We do have actually very good people around this. So we have a great sales team, and we have support that is also adapted to this target group, so that we can speak their language, both literally, because we have a lot of international customers who speak other languages, but also speak the language in terms of complexity of the technology, so that they understand what this is. And I think it's not hard to get them to use our solution, because they really need help and they want someone to solve this for them. So they are happy to hand over the responsibility and the complexity if they can. But it's of course, before that, it's of course our job to explain what it is we do in a language that they understand, and take it from there.
I understand. So in all essence, digital inclusion is sort of a concept. It's something that is sort of key for your business.
Yes, definitely.
So now I get a better understanding on, the sort of target audience, and so jumping a little bit, but you mentioned the payment methods. So a normal person would then, cash and card. So at some point, Sweden is considered to be, in the forefront of using digital payments. What's your take on what would happen in general, if we come to that point where, there is no cash in the society? Is that your ultimate goal, or is that something that you are sort of as a trend following? Is that a part of your sort of, at least from a mental perspective, that you are following?
Yes. So like in the last 10 years in Sweden, we have gone to 40% of people using cash in payments to less than 10. And that is actually quite a short time period, with a very big decrease in the amount of cash payments. And since the pandemic, we've seen even more acceleration of, for example, Swish. If you would look at a curve of the usage and the payment volume of Swish during these couple of years, it's a big increase. So there's definitely less cash out there and more digital payment methods. And we also see that it's not only then cards, it's mobile wallets.
Yeah.
And also, since the outbreak of the pandemic, there's been more interest in cryptocurrency. And also, if you look globally, there's a lot of local debit cards and local payment methods that count as alternative payment methods. And for our merchants and in our world, we just want to accept the payment methods that people want to pay with. And if it's Swish or anything else, it doesn't really matter. We just want to make it easy to our customers. And I guess when it comes to risk that you mentioned, the risk is, of course, at least how I see it, the people who don't want the digital payments. Because in one report that the Swedish Central Bank did, over half of the people over 65 years old, they don't want digital payments. They are negative towards the trend of that. And we want to support all customers. That means that we might need to still support some cash payments. But if you talk to a payment person like me, I of course see more possibilities than risks. I see that we can build more seamless experiences because, in the past you have received the payment in the cashier and you need to count the cash, put it in the drawer, and then take out the exchange,
Very manual.
Yeah. And it takes time.
Yes.
And today you can just tap your card or your smartphone and the payment is done. And in some cases, you can even pay in your phone and then just go and grab what you have ordered or whatever. So payments is becoming actually invisible thanks to technology. Yeah. And I think that's a great possibility.
I totally agree. I think it was, you mentioned that people over 65, I think you said 65, that a huge percentage that in a survey that want to pay with cash. They don't want to do this transition. They are not comfortable with that, and they expect to be able to do the payment with cash. I think you can then think that, okay, but they are over 65, etc. But in terms of, this is just the monetary value that they stand for. So even if they, quotation marks here, they are old people, the transaction volume that kind of generation stands for is, I guess, it's quite substantial. They have purchasing power, and then obviously if they want to keep the cash payment as a method, obviously it doesn't affect you per se in your job, but it's something at least to acknowledge and recognize.
I think we as tech companies have a responsibility to see all people. And of course, new payment methods are cool and we think it's smoother. But for example, at Yabie, we still support cash payments. Even if it would be a small percentage, we would support it and help our merchants accept it.
I remember when I was younger, there was, or I guess they are still around, but Dubro, which is a phone company, I think. So, and no one, obviously, in my age, wanted to have a Dubro telephone. But that generation we were talking about, they want to have the cash experience still. But if and when you guys and girls will develop, you are in that phase now. But if you are focusing even more on how can we make that generation to understand how to conduct the digital transactions.
And I think it's coming, and there's so many neobanks now that are exploring different ways of making banking much easier. And I think that's definitely our future as well, because it won't be as complex as going to the normal internet bank and make a international transaction. Soon it will, or it's already super simple. thanks to a lot of fintechs out there that focus on different target groups. So yeah, definitely.
Now potentially jumping a little bit further around the topics, but another sort of interesting topic to just elaborate a little bit around is your service and your approach. Imagine would be quite interesting in exploring to expand to other territories, because one of the things that you can see in general is that countries. So, for an example, I'm born in Nepal a long time ago. But what I experienced when I travel there is that I've obviously the last 10, 15 years, I've seen a change in what they have done is obviously they've jumped, they made this leap instead of going through, the whole cycle of, first cash, then legacy old system. So they're jumping that. So everyone is then obviously paying with their mobile phone. And they did it, I think, way before Swish was sort of established as a payment method. I think that is sort of quite interesting how other countries, developing countries, is then able to potentially, in some areas, is much more advanced than other countries that would be considered as a developed country or a modern country.
Yeah, that's definitely a case that we see that the mobile wallets or digital payments, they have, for example, been a reason why contactless payments increase in some markets. So the contactless payments didn't have their breakthrough with the normal cards that accept contactless, but with the wallets, which is quite interesting. And we can also see that, for example, Apple Pay and Google Pay is more used in other countries than in Sweden. We think in Sweden we are very technical,
Yes.
and that we like new technical solutions, but we see it being more popular in some other countries that we may not expect. And you mentioned Nepal, but we also see in China that there's these big techs that now invest in payment methods like WeChat. They have WeChat Pay, and we also have Alipay. And then those two methods represent, I think it was 94% of all digital payments in the country. And those are social media platforms, which is quite interesting, that is driving the digital payments. So it's quite interesting to see how some countries, they skip the way of, like you said, cash, card, mobile payments. They go directly from cash to mobile payments. And we talked about digital inclusion before. Maybe this is a version of that in these countries. And it's quite impressive to see.
Is that sort of progress or evolution of payment something that, quotation mark, scares you as a product manager for you? Because, okay, yes, that happens in China, that happens in Nepal, that happens in countries in Africa, etc. But for me, listening to that, when big tech companies is investing into this, so they are not only becoming a social media platform with 1 billion users, they also provide this sort of payment solution. I'm just reckon that if that would happen in Sweden, or if and I guess it might come, I'm not following it, but if Facebook would decide, that okay, let's include payment solutions into this, would be quite sort of, from a competitive landscape, it would be quite a challenge for any company that isn't of that size.
We see this now actually when Apple launched Tap to Pay. So they are now building a technology where they allow people to accept card payments through an Apple device. Yeah. But how they have chosen to do it now is to offer an SDK for payment service providers so that we can offer this technology in our apps. Or
for me, it sounds like they still want you guys to be around, because they are giving you that opportunity so that you can sort of follow that trend and offer that to your customers. You built in that smartness that Apple has done, and then you provide it to your merchants.
Yes. Like at the moment, this technology is not available in Europe, but this is definitely something that companies like Yabie is excited about and looking into instead of being afraid, since we see this as a possibility. And I do think that these tech giants, even if they have a lot of power, they still need the expertise that we sit on. You can't be an expert on everything. And I think that in this approach that Apple is doing, it's quite smart because they can offer something that is integrated towards something else, and that becomes really great products. And it's a win-win.
So that basically means that I'm guessing now a little bit, but some part of your role or your job or your at least colleagues is constantly to understand those changes and those sort of developments in within the payment industry, sort of business intelligence and to follow those sort of trends, because it seems like it's a landscape that is changing quite fast. Technology advance, new technology arises, and other players enters into the market and sort of changing the landscape. So not only sort of focusing on product and tech development, but it seems like to be successful you need to follow all those sort of mega trends or small trends or what is happening around the world.
Exactly. That's our job, to look into this and kind of be the merchant's IT department, who looks into this for them. And a lot of these trends are relevant to our specific target group. A lot of trends may not be. I don't think, for example, or cryptocurrency may not be relevant for our target group at the moment. But of course, we keep an eye on everything that's going on. And then we make sure that we are relevant for our customers so that they have what they need to take payments.
I understand.
And with all these changes, of course, there's a lot of, if you work in payments, you keep an eye also on the different regulations and security aspects of all this, because I think with the rise of so many alternative payment methods, cryptocurrencies, and we want to accept these payments also cross borders. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to how do we keep this secure and how do we keep it regulated. And here there's a lot of work that needs to happen, both with the authorities of each country, but also between and together with the different fintechs and payment service providers. So there's a lot of that type of work that needs to happen as well.
I understand. And as working at Boring, where we are sort of hopefully trying to help our customers, smooth onboarding processes for kind of services. But you mentioned regulations, and how does that? Are you good at removing those sort of manual processes when you are? If I'm a vendor or a merchant that would like to be a customer of yours, there's obviously a lot of control mechanism. So there is AML, there's KYC processes. Is that all? Obviously, that's a part of your offering, because if that's smooth and if you can accept as many clients as you want, but still follow the regulations, have done your sort of analysis of a potential customer, are Yabie working, with that as well too? Because that is a part of you have the UX part, you have the technology part, but then obviously the onboarding part of a customer is equally important, because if it's complicated to become a customer, you can have a world-class service, great UX UI, but if it's a nightmare in becoming a client, because you need to fill in this PDF form to be able to be a customer. I'm curious, is that a part of your work as well, or do you work with those kind of automized processes?
Of course, compliance is super important for us since we're a point of sale and payments company. And these processes we make very easy for our customers, so they don't need to suffer from the complexity that may be in the background of all this. So what we try to offer them is a much easier onboarding experience as compared to if you would go directly to a bank and go through old processes that may have been the only way in the past. And we do that also with the help of our onboarding team that we have in place so that they can explain everything that's going on. And of course, with digital solutions and integrations using APIs instead of manual processes, so that the process gets quicker and also seamless for our customer.
I mean, I guess that's the advantage of being a sort of a fintech company and do not have old legacy of that traditional banks have. They have great resources in terms of money, but they're obviously challenged by their tech infrastructure and all legacy systems. But you can sort of, and you are doing the same thing. You are jumping, you're leaping over that, and you can actually do it the right way with automized processes and using APIs to deliver a more flawless sort of customer onboarding.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming to the end of the podcast, but while I have you here, and you mentioned it before, but I guess some of our listeners, and including me, is you said it quite well. At this stage, cryptocurrency might not, change the way you do things and what you're thinking about to do at the moment. But I'm guessing that the whole concept of e-currency or a cryptocurrency within the near time future, can potentially be a game changer or changing the landscape. Do you have any sort of general thoughts about cryptocurrencies? Do you think that, hey, you ain't going to be able to pay with cryptocurrency in McDonald's or in paying for a drink in the bar? Is that 15 years from now, or is that, is it, I guess there are some cards that you can attach to a blockchain wallet, but do you see it as a potential method of payment in your industry?
Yeah, I see it coming, because since we also see the increase since the outbreak of the pandemic, so I think it's around the corner that more and more people start to use it and want to use it. And we did see what Facebook tried to do, creating their own cryptocurrency. And I think it's only one of many coming attempts for more players to offer alternative payment methods. And that is, of course, a trend that we at our company will follow, because we care about the payment methods that our merchants' customers want to pay with, and we want to support those payment methods. So we are keeping an eye on that. And I think it's the future, or it could be part of the future. But I also think there's lots still to see that we don't know, because a lot of things are happening in payments all the time. And there's a lot of innovation and cool companies out there. So I think it's still a lot to come. And
yeah, for sure. And do you think I will be able to pay for my drink with cash in 10 years in Sweden?
Good question. Not in many places.
No. So yeah, change is coming. And with that, I'm really happy that you joined. Thank you so much, Isabell, for taking time to clarify things and explain a little bit about payments and your thoughts around the future of payments, and for me getting a better understanding on the landscape. So with that said, I'm thanking you, Isabell, and thank you our listeners for listening.
Thank you.
You've been listening to an episode of a Roaring podcast by Roaring.io. If you liked it, share it with a friend or a colleague. We would also love to stay connected with you. Please feel free to subscribe to the show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.